Those Muslims, they're crazy, they're stubborn, they're fanatical. And so Hamas, the Islamic movement, it kept saying till the end of December, we're ready to renew the ceasefire. We're willing to renew the ceasefire. But Israel has to respect its obligations under the ceasefire. Israel has to lift the blockade of Gaza. Israel said no. Israel said that Hamas have to stop the rocket and mortar attacks on Israel, but Israel would not give any commitment to lift the blockade. By the end of December, Sarah Roy of Harvard University, who's the world's leading authority in the Gaza economy, she also happens to be the daughter of a survivor of Auschwitz concentration camp. Sarah Roy wrote, "The breakdown of an entire society is happening in front of us in Gaza, but there is little international response beyond UN warnings which are ignored." And now the people of Gaza, Hamas, they were faced with two stark options. One, they could acquiesce, they could agree to their gradual and systematic and methodical destruction. Or two, they could resist, they could fight. Hamas elected to resist, although it must be said that the resistance was largely symbolic. The former Israeli commander in Gaza, speaking to his fellow Israelis, he said at this time, "You cannot just land blows, leave the Palestinians in Gaza in economic distress, and then expect Hamas to just sit around and do nothing." It's easy enough to condemn Hamas for the rocket and mortar attacks, but it does seem to me if you want to condemn them, as all the human rights organizations did, you still have the obligation of showing what other option did they have. If you don't show another option, then you're in effect saying that the people of Gaza had a legal and moral obligation to just lie still and die. In any case, Israel decided to speed up the process, to expedite the process, and so on December 27th, it invaded Gaza, and it remained for 22 days, what Amnesty International called the 22 days of death and destruction. Well, what did happen in Gaza during those 22 days? Nowadays, when people refer back to those 22 days, they say there was a war in Gaza. Human rights organizations, when they publish their reports, they refer to the Gaza war. Even I think if the translation was correct, one of the gentlemen who introduced me, or introduced this evening's events, he referred to the Gaza war. Well, the Israelis were very insistent that there was a war in Gaza, because they said, now we have restored our deterrence capacity. The Arabs, the Muslims, they're afraid of us again. And they're afraid of us because we won the war in Gaza. We won the war in Gaza. But then along came an Israeli strategic analyst, and he said, it is very dangerous for Israel to believe it won the war when there was no war. In reality, not a single battle was fought during the 22 days of fighting. Not a single battle was fought during the 22 days of fighting. A former Israeli foreign ministry official, he said there was no war. Hamas sat in its bunkers and came out when it was all over. So what did happen in Gaza? On a military level, it's pretty clear what happened. The Israelis supplied the statistics, and in this case, there's no reason to doubt them. The attack in Gaza began with what was called the air phase. After 22 days, Israel had flown between 2,800 and 3,000 combat missions over Gaza. Every plane returned. Not a single plane was down. In fact, not a single plane was damaged, which is not too surprising because the people of Gaza had no anti-aircraft defenses to speak of. After the first week, on June 3rd, began the ground and air phase of the attack. The Israeli soldiers had special night warfare equipment. Hamas couldn't even see them, let alone fight with them. So what did happen in Gaza? No battles, no fighting, no planes down, no planes damaged. Hamas couldn't even see the Israeli combat troops, let alone fight them. So what happened? Actually, we have a source which one might call unimpeachable. That is to say, you can't doubt its truthfulness. It's the testimony of the Israeli soldiers who, after the invasion, they described what they experienced in Gaza. Soldier, there was nothing there. Ghost towns. Except for some livestock, nothing moved. Soldier, most of the time it was boring. There were not really too many events. Soldier, I did not see one single Arab the whole time you were there, that whole week. Soldier, everyone was disappointed about not engaging anyone. Soldier, usually we did not see a living soul, except for our soldiers, of course, not a soul. Soldier, go ahead, ask the other soldiers how often they encountered combatants in Gaza. Nothing. No one. Soldier, there was supposed to be a tiny resistance force upon entering Gaza, but there just wasn't any. Sounds kind of surreal. It's almost funny. A war with only one side. And it would be funny were it not for the other half of the picture. For the other half of the picture, it's easy enough for you to discover on your own. All you have to do is go to your computer and Google the document Breaking the Silence. And when the document comes up on your screen, it's a collection of testimonies of Israeli soldiers on what they experienced in Gaza. And then all you have to do is enter under the search function the word insane. And if you enter the word insane, it comes up once, twice, insane, insane, 5 times insane, 6 times insane. The soldiers were interviewed separately, but the same word kept leaping to mind for each soldier. Israel used insane amounts of firepower in Gaza. Israel used insane amounts of firepower in Gaza. Israel used insane amounts of firepower in Gaza. No battles, no fighting, no enemy in the field, but Israel's using insane amounts of firepower in Gaza. One soldier said, "This was firepower such as I had never known. There were blasts all the time. The earth was constantly shaking." Another soldier said, "On the ground you hear these thunderous blasts all day long. I mean, not just tank shelling, which was a tune we'd long gotten used to, but blasts that actually rocked the houses, to the extent that some of us were ordered out of the house we were quartered in for fear it would collapse." The Israeli soldiers invaded Gaza. They took control of the Palestinian homes, and from the homes, they're firing into the horizon. But these insane amounts of firepower are causing the ground underneath them to shake. And so the Israelis were told to abandon the houses because the houses might collapse on them. So what did happen in Gaza? Actually, the Israeli soldiers came up with the most revealing images. One soldier said, "It felt like hunting season had begun. Sometimes it reminded me of a PlayStation computer game." Another soldier said, "You felt like a child playing around with a magnifying glass, burning up ants. You felt like a child playing around with a magnifying glass, burning up ants." A couple of soldiers were convicted, Israeli soldiers were convicted for having used the Palestinian child as a human shield in Gaza. And this past week, the sentence was handed down by an Israeli judge. And the judge handed down a sentence of 3-month suspended sentence. A 3-month suspended sentence. And he had to explain why he gave such a ridiculous sentence for the crime that was committed. And so his explanation was, because you have to understand, there were very dangerous combat conditions in Gaza. Very dangerous combat conditions. Now, when I was a child, I'm not proud of it, but I had my magnifying glass. Focus the rays of the sun, turn the ants into, incinerate the ants. Now, I'm not proud of what I did, but I've never suffered from the delusion that I was experiencing dangerous combat conditions. In fact, the language that the Israeli soldiers used, the language was, very apt